Well, since I'm vertically challenged, I've spent a good bit of my life up to this point walking fast to keep up with taller people. One of my dearest friends is probably almost 12 inches taller than I am. And we used to go lots of places together, and me trying to keep up, I had to walk. And at one point, I didn't consider myself a runner, but I jogged with him, and he would take one step, and I'd have to take two almost in order to keep up. So uh, I rarely was ahead, right? But there's always this little thing, it wasn't even conscious, a subconscious message: hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Uh, I don't guess that's wrong. There's certainly no sin in it. But one of the problems is if it's physical, what could be? I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? So why am I talking about it? Well, because sometimes spiritually we think hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Emotionally we think hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And sometimes what we're trying to do is get out ahead. Well, if we do that spiritually, there are some hindrances, there's some pitfalls, not just hindrances. And John writes about this in verse 9 of 2 John. Remember, there's only one chapter in 2 John. Anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Okay, now, this is not John saying, you gotta be thoughtful about things and don't run ahead because you could get in trouble. No, he says, anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teachings of Christ does not have God. There is no more hopeless condition to be in. And one of the aspects that I think we have to look at in this is the folks who are most often, I think in my experience, are most often inclined to run ahead are people who generally claim to have God. What does it mean to run ahead of the commands of Christ? What does it mean to run ahead and not continue in the teachings of Christ? Well, again, in the context of this letter, when I think about its original intention, its original recipients, and the occasion that prompted John's writing this letter, it was about Gnosticism. And that's a dead horse we've beaten. So I'm not going to beat the drum again, just to remind you. The Gnostics were not pagans trying to draw people away from the Christian faith. These were Christians that had been drawn away from the actual primary and fundamental teachings of Jesus and the apostles, and they were in fact running ahead. They were outside of God's revelation, and they thought what they had was the real truth. And anybody who hadn't reached their level of enlightenment was intellectually and spiritually, and probably in every other way, subnormal. They were unintellectual. They were unenlightened. They were less than. That's one of the ways that this running ahead thing can show itself. So how do you keep from running ahead? Well, it's not as hard as, it's not like you got to do this and this and this and this and this. To me, it's pretty simple, because John writes, anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teachings of Christ. See, that's the deal. when you don't continue in the teachings of Christ, I suppose you could run behind as well. And there are people who do, they just disregard and the teachings of Christ, and they're going to live however they want to. And then there are those others who they run ahead trying to, and they create this whole paradigm, this whole worldview, this whole theology that does not continue in the teachings of Christ. It takes them off of. Whatever it is that takes us off the teachings of Christ puts us in a position where John writes strong words. Those who do not, anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. It seems harsh to say it this way, but I'm thinking what his meaning is. If you don't have God, where do you go when you die? I don't think you get a second chance. I think you get all kinds of second chances as long as you're alive. But once you die, that door closes. And if I die and I do not have God, I believe there's a real hell, and I believe people who do not have God will go there after they die. I also believe that God doesn't send them there. He just gives them what they wanted. He observes their desire. Well, so how do you keep from running ahead? Well, here the key, I'll say it again. Anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teachings of Christ does not have God. Well, here's the thing. The point is, continue in the teachings of Christ. At least two things about that. First of all, you'll never be able to continue in the teachings of Christ if you don't know what the teachings of Christ are. Now, a lot of people depend on, they rely on somebody else to inform them and keep them motivated and thoughtful about the teachings of Christ, right? They go to church a couple of times a month. They more or less pay attention to the preaching. But they kind of have a little box for that, right? And that box doesn't quite fit in the broad picture of their actual day-to-day reality. They like reaching into it and pulling from it, and they like, kind of getting into their box when they're at church, and when I'm sounding very judgmental, and I'm sorry, but this is kind of my observation. They like that box when it fits their convenience and their preferences. And when they can do what they want to and still be in the box, that's good, right? Well, first of all, we kind of need to get rid of that box. You don't do yourself any favor by pigeonholing the commands of Christ to this little piece of your life. So here's the first thing about the commands of Christ, the teachings of Christ. First of all, you will not just naturally know the teachings of Christ. You have to seek them out. Where do you go for that? Well, there's all kinds of fine Bible preaching. You can get it on the radio, on your TV, podcasts of preaching are, and I'll use a vocabulary word I've been trying to work in conversation here for a while. They are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. You don't have hundreds of options if you click up Bible preaching or Bible teaching podcasts. You have thousands on the menu. I'm not even saying, I am not saying those are wrong. Some of them are good. Not all. It's just like everything else, but Where do you go? Where is the fountainhead? Where is the source, the headwaters of the teachings of Christ? They're not in a commentary. Honestly, they're not in my teaching. They're not in any other Bible teacher's teaching. They're in the 4 biographies of Jesus, the book of Acts, that then shows you these teachings in action. It's the Acts of the Apostles, the behaviors, the story of the first probably 60 or 70 years of the church, or fewer. And then you have the epistles, the letters that the apostles wrote. I will never forget when I was in high school, we were in Sunday school class, and our teacher asked, well, what is an epistle? And one of the girls in the classroom raised her hand and said, isn't that an apostle's wife? It was a good guess, but I think she overthought it. An epistle is a letter. The epistles, the letters, which make up the majority of the books of the Newer Testament. And they describe application of the teaching of Christ and reiteration of the teachings of Christ. And then you have Revelation. Revelation is a bird's eye view of past, present, and future. It gives us a glimpse into where history is going. And in the end, the last 2 chapters of Revelation are probably 2 of my favorite chapters in the Bible, because they give us a description, mostly in symbolism, but a description nonetheless of what heaven will be like, what is our destination. Now, where do you want to go to, what's the word I want to, it's not like you capture, but you embrace, because you have to first encounter and then embrace the teachings of Jesus. The 4 biographies, what we call the Gospels, the good news. And pay very close attention to what Jesus said and did. An amazing small number of Christians have done this. Oh, I've probably read all the Gospels at one time or another. Well, good for you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about start in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, and go all the way through John 21 to the end. You don't, well, by the way, don't get bogged down in the genealogies. At some point in time, they may make sense to you and they may hold interest, but if they don't, just get through them and go on and follow this narrative of what Jesus did and said. Is this all Jesus did and said? Couldn't be. It's not possible. Is it kind of a docudrama of Jesus' life? In a way, except it is Jesus' biography from perspectives of 4 different individuals, all inspired by God Himself through the Holy Spirit. There is a spiritual power in Jesus' story. But most people don't know enough about Jesus' story to encounter that spiritual power there. They take somebody else's word for it. Don't. I'm not saying distrust people, but I'm just saying why would you excuse me, why would you depend on me to tell you what's there when you can find out yourself? It's not written in Chinese or Russian. You've got an English Bible. Get it out, dust it off, read the Gospels, encounter the teachings of Christ. The second part is to continue in them. And that's where we're going to continue next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.